The letter arrived at the mortal palace, wrapped in midnight silk, sealed with crimson wax bearing a crest Delilah Vance had seen only once before, the ancient mark of the vampire king. And it was addressed not to King Marcus Thornwell of the human realm, but to his most trusted advisor, Lord Pemberton Drake. Delilah stood frozen in the mail sorting room, her fingers trembling as she held the envelope that could unravel everything. She was just a secretary, 23 years old, hired 6 months ago to manage correspondence for the palace's administrative wing. She wasn't supposed to open private letters, but the wax had cracked during transport, and a single line of elegant script showed through the tear. The treaty you requested cannot be honored under current circumstances. We must speak of your true parentage before the rest remained hidden, but those words alone made her blood turn to ice. Lord Pemberton Drake was the king's right hand, the man who had negotiated the fragile peace between humans and vampires 5 years ago. He was brilliant, handsome in that sharp-edged way that made servants whisper, and utterly essential to King Marcus's rule. He was also apparently hiding something catastrophic. Delilah's mind raced. If King Marcus discovered that his most trusted advisor had been corresponding secretly with the vampire king, and that there was something about Drake's parentage that contradicted the treaty's terms, the peace would shatter. The vampire clans would see it as human deception. War would ignite before sunrise, and it was nearly midnight now. She heard footsteps approaching down the marble corridor. Without thinking, Delilah stuffed the letter into her jacket and grabbed a stack of ordinary mail, pretending to sort through invitations and tax documents as 2 royal guards passed by. Her heart hammered so violently she thought they might hear it, but they merely nodded and continued their patrol. When silence returned, Delilah slipped out through the servants' entrance and into the cold November night. The palace gardens stretched before her, skeletal trees casting shadows under a crescent moon. She needed to think. She needed to understand what this meant before anyone else saw it, but she wasn't alone. You took something that doesn't belong to you. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, smooth as velvet and cold as winter's first frost. Delilah spun, her breath misting in the suddenly frigid air, and found herself face to face with someone who couldn't possibly be human. He stood beneath a barren oak tree, tall and impossibly beautiful, with hair the color of freshly fallen snow that fell past his shoulders in waves. His skin was pale as moonlight, flawless and luminous, and his eyes, God. His eyes were the color of ancient amber, burning with an intelligence that made her feel like a child caught stealing. He wore modern clothes, a perfectly tailored black coat over a dark shirt, but he carried himself like royalty from another age entirely. "Who are you?" Delilah managed, though her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "You know who I am." He moved toward her with inhuman grace, each step deliberate. "You're holding my letter. I can smell my own seal, the ink I used. More importantly, I can hear your heart racing with guilt and fear." His lips curved, revealing just a hint of dangerously sharp canines. "I am Casimir Nightborn, king of the Shadow Vale Court, sovereign of the Northern Territories, and you, little human, have interfered with matters far beyond your understanding." Delilah's hand instinctively moved to protect the letter in her jacket. "I didn't mean to. It was already damaged when I found it." "Yet you read it anyway." Casimir stopped 3 feet away, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "And then you stole it rather than delivering it to its intended recipient." "Why?" "Because it would start a war," Delilah said, surprised by her own boldness. "If King Marcus finds out Lord Drake has been secretly communicating with you, if he learns there's something about Drake's bloodline that violates the treaty." "So you did read it?" Casimir's expression remained unreadable. "And you made yourself complicit in the secret by hiding it. Do you understand what you've done? If your king discovers this deception, he could execute you for treason. Better me than thousands dead in another war." The words tumbled out before Delilah could stop them. "I remember the last one. I was 18 when it ended. I saw the bodies in the streets, the cities burned, families torn apart. My brother died fighting vampires in the northern campaigns." She lifted her chin, meeting those ancient amber eyes. "So yes, I took the letter. And I'd do it again." Something shifted in Casimir's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or a grudging respect. "You have courage, at least. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." He extended one pale, elegant hand. "Give me the letter. I'll destroy it, and this incident will be forgotten." "No." His eyes flashed dangerously. "That wasn't a request." "I don't care." Delilah stepped backward, her mind working frantically. "If you destroy it, Lord Drake won't know that you tried to warn him. He won't know that whatever he asked for was denied. That could be dangerous, too, for both our kingdoms." Casimir went very still, the kind of stillness that only predators achieved. "You're attempting to negotiate with me." "I'm attempting to prevent a war," Delilah corrected. "And I think you are too, or you wouldn't have written that letter in the first place. You would have just let Lord Drake walk into whatever trap he was setting for himself." For a long moment, Casimir said nothing. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of approaching winter, and something else, something ancient and powerful, that made Delilah's instincts scream at her to run. But she held her ground. Finally, the Vampire King spoke. "What do you propose?" "Let me deliver it to Lord Drake privately. Tonight, before King Marcus's morning council session. That gives Drake time to handle whatever this is before it becomes public." "And why should I trust you to do that? You could take it directly to your king instead." "Because I don't want war any more than you do." Delilah's voice steadied. "And because you're still here talking to me instead of just taking it by force. That means you need someone inside the palace who can move without suspicion, someone like me." Casimir studied her for so long that Delilah began to wonder if he could read minds as well as hear heartbeats. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a rich, genuine sound that seemed at odds with his lethal beauty. "You're either remarkably clever or remarkably stupid, and I haven't decided which." He moved closer, near enough that Delilah could feel the unnatural cold radiating from him. "Very well. Deliver my letter to Pemberton Drake. But understand this, Delilah Vance, yes, I know your name. I know everyone who works in that palace. If you betray me, if you take that letter to your king, I will know. And I will come for you." It should have sounded like a threat. It was a threat. But the way he said her name, with that slight accent that spoke of centuries past, made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "I won't betray you," Delilah said quietly. "I give you my word." The word of a human. Casimir reached out, and before she could flinch away, his cold fingers brushed her cheek. "How quaint, but I'll accept it for now. Deliver the letter before dawn. That gives Drake 4 hours to read it, process it, and make his choices. After sunrise, I return to the Shadow Vale, and this opportunity passes. Where do I find you if something goes wrong? You don't. I'll find you." He stepped back, shadows seeming to gather around him. "Be careful, little secretary. You've wandered into a game of kings and immortals. One wrong move and you'll be crushed." Then he was gone, vanished so completely that Delilah half wondered if she'd imagined the entire encounter, but the cold spot where he'd stood remained, and her cheek still tingled where he'd touched her. She looked down at the letter in her shaking hands, then toward the palace's eastern wing where Lord Drake kept his private chambers. 4 hours until dawn. Delilah ran. The eastern wing was quieter than the main palace, reserved for high-ranking officials and their personal staff. Delilah had been here only twice before, always on official business during daylight hours. Now, sneaking through lamplit corridors at midnight, she felt like an intruder in her own workplace. Lord Drake's chambers occupied the 3rd floor, behind a heavy oak door carved with the royal seal. Light showed beneath it he was still awake. Delilah raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What if he was meeting with someone? What if he called the guards the moment she revealed what she'd done? The door opened before she could decide. Pemberton Drake stood in the doorway, dressed in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, his dark hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He was 32, with the kind of classical features that would have been at home in a Renaissance painting. Strong jaw, intelligent dark eyes, an air of contained power. Right now, though, he looked exhausted. "Miss Vance," his voice was clipped, professional. "It's rather late for official business." "I know, my lord. I apologize, but this couldn't wait." Delilah glanced down the corridor, ensuring they were alone. "I have something that belongs to you, something that arrived tonight through unofficial channels." Drake's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He stepped aside. "Come in, quickly." The chambers were elegant but surprisingly Spartan bookshelves, lined with legal texts and historical volumes, a desk covered in papers, a single glass of amber liquid sitting abandoned. No personal touches, no photographs or mementos. It was the room of a man who lived for his work. Drake closed the door and locked it. "Show me." Delilah pulled out the letter. The moment Drake saw the crimson seal, his face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "The mail sorting room. It came with tonight's diplomatic pouch, but it was addressed to you personally, not through official channels. The seal was already cracked." She watched him carefully. "I read part of it. Not all, but enough." Drake took the letter with hands that weren't quite steady. He broke the seal completely and read, his expression growing darker with each line. When he finished, he was silent for so long that Delilah began to worry. "My lord?" "This is disaster," he said quietly. "Absolute disaster." "Then it's true? What the letter implies about your parentage?" Drake looked at her, and for the first time she saw genuine fear in his eyes. 6 months ago, I discovered documents in my late mother's belongings, letters, confessions. My father, the man I believed was my father, wasn't. My biological father was a vampire noble named Lucian Nightborn, Casimir's younger brother. Delilah's breath caught. "You're half vampire." "According to the letters, yes. My mother had an affair during the last days of the previous war. She was human, married to a human lord, but she fell in love with one of the enemy. When she discovered she was pregnant, she fled back to human territory and passed me off as her husband's son." Drake's voice was hollow. "I didn't even know vampires could have children with humans until I read those letters." "It's rare," said a new voice. Both Delilah and Drake spun toward the window where Casimir Nightborn now stood, having apparently appeared from thin air. He looked amused by their shock. "Did you think I wouldn't follow her?" Casimir said calmly. "I needed to see how this played out." Drake's hand went to the ceremonial dagger at his belt, but he didn't draw it. "Your Majesty, this is an unexpected honor." "Don't insult my intelligence with pleasantries, nephew." Casimir moved into the room with that same predatory grace. "You petitioned me 6 months ago, asking for confirmation of your bloodline and requesting that the treaty be amended to account for your mixed heritage. I've spent half a year investigating, consulting with my advisors, and researching our own ancient laws." He gestured to the letter. "And now I've given you my answer. Under the terms of the current treaty, any human with vampire blood serving in King Marcus's government is considered a spy and grounds for immediate war." "I didn't know," Drake said desperately. "I've served King Marcus faithfully for 10 years. I've never betrayed humanity. I didn't even know what I was until recently." "I believe you." Casimir's tone softened slightly. "My brother Lucian died in the final battle of the war. But before he died, he told me about a human woman he'd loved, a woman carrying his child. I thought it was fever dreams, the delusions of a dying vampire. I never imagined it was true." He looked at Drake with something like sympathy. "You look like him. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. He would have been proud of the man you've become." Drake's composure cracked. "Then help me. There must be some way to resolve this without war. I'll resign my position. I'll go into exile, whatever it takes." "If you resign suddenly, King Marcus will demand to know why," Delilah interjected. Both men looked at her and she felt heat rise to her face, but pushed on. "He'll investigate. He'll discover the truth, and then the treaty is broken anyway." "The secretary is correct," Casimir said, "which is why I've come here tonight to propose an alternative solution, one that will require courage from all of us and deception in the short term to prevent catastrophe in the long term." "What solution?" Drake asked. Casimir's amber eyes gleamed. "You must be publicly executed at dawn by vampire law." The room went deathly silent. "Absolutely not," Delilah said. At the same time, Drake said, "That's insane." Casimir held up one pale hand. "Let me explain. The treaty contains a provision that I added specifically for situations like this, though I never thought I'd need to use it. If a vampire or half-vampire is discovered serving in human government, they can be claimed by the vampire court and subjected to our justice rather than human justice. This prevents the human kingdom from being held responsible for the breach." "You want to claim me as vampire?" Drake's voice was incredulous. I want to save your life and prevent a war. Casimir's tone turned sharp. At dawn, I will formally present myself to King Marcus and inform him that a half-vampire has infiltrated his government. Before he can respond, I will invoke the treaty provision and claim jurisdiction over you. You will be taken into vampire custody. As far as the mortal world is concerned, you'll be executed for your crimes against both kingdoms. But in reality? Delilah asked, her mind racing. In reality, Pemberton Drake will live in the Shadow Vale under my protection. He'll serve as a liaison between our courts, a bridge between two worlds. His knowledge of human government will be invaluable, and his vampire heritage gives him legal standing in my court. Casimir looked between them. It's not perfect. Drake will have to leave behind everything he's built here, but he'll live, and the treaty will hold. Drake sank into a chair, processing this. King Marcus will think I betrayed him. King Marcus will think you were a spy who got caught, Casimir corrected. Your reputation will be destroyed, but you'll be alive, and humanity will be safe. Isn't that worth the sacrifice? What about the people who work for me, my staff, my colleagues? Drake looked at Delilah. They'll be interrogated, suspected of complicity. Which is why we need a witness, Casimir said, his gaze also settling on Delilah. Someone respected in the palace who can testify that you were taken by force, that you resisted, that there was no conspiracy. Someone whose testimony will satisfy the king's investigators. Delilah's heart sank as she realized what he was asking. You want me to lie to the king, to claim I witnessed your arrest? I want you to save thousands of lives, Casimir said bluntly. Yes, it requires deception. Yes, it requires courage. But you've already shown you possess both. He moved closer, and again Delilah felt that strange flutter in her chest. I watched you in the garden. You chose to steal a letter that could condemn you rather than risk war. You chose danger over safety. I'm asking you to make that choice again. Why do you trust me? The question burst from Delilah. You don't know me. I'm nobody. Why risk everything on the word of a secretary? Casimir smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Because you're brave and selfless and foolish enough to steal from the vampire king. Because you've already proven you'll do what's right even when it costs you. And because... He stopped, something unreadable flickering across his features. Because I need someone in the mortal court I can trust, someone who understands what we're trying to prevent. Drake stood. This is asking too much of her. Miss Vance, you don't have to agree to this. I can find another way. What other way? Delilah looked at him. If you run, they'll hunt you. If you confess, they'll execute you and probably declare war anyway out of humiliation. If you stay silent, the truth will eventually surface. She took a deep breath. His Majesty is right. This is the only solution that saves everyone. You'll be questioned extensively, Casimir warned. The king's investigators will probe every detail of your story. You'll have to be convincing. Tell me exactly what I need to say. For the next 2 hours, they planned. Casimir explained exactly how the morning would unfold, the words he would say, the legal provisions he would invoke. Drake provided details about the palace's security protocols, the best location for the arrest to take place, which guards would be on duty. Delilah memorized her role, the terrified witness who stumbled upon a vampire taking away a traitor. The king will want to know how I discovered Drake's heritage, Casimir said. I'll claim that my spies have been investigating rumors for months. That will be more believable than the truth that Drake himself approached me. What happens to the original letter? Delilah asked. Casimir held out his hand, and the parchment on Drake's desk burst into flames. It burned completely in seconds, leaving only ash. What letter? Despite everything, Delilah almost smiled. As the first hints of pre-dawn gray touched the windows, Casimir outlined the final details. At sunrise, I'll enter through the main gates. I'll demand an immediate audience with King Marcus. That will give you about 15 minutes. Drake, you'll be in the east courtyard. Miss Vance, you'll arrive there as if by chance you're taking an early morning walk, clearing your head after a long night of work. And then you'll take him, Delilah said. With appropriate drama, Casimir confirmed. I am a king, after all. I have a reputation to maintain. His expression sobered. Drake, Once you cross into the shadow veil, you cannot return. Not for years, perhaps decades. The mortal world must believe you're gone. You understand that? Drake nodded, his face drawn. I understand. Miss Vance. Casimir turned to her, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. You're sure about this? Once we begin, there's no turning back. If the deception is discovered, King Marcus will consider you a traitor. The penalty for that is death. I'm sure, Delilah said, more confidently than she felt. Casimir studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Very well. Then we have a plan. He moved toward the window, preparing to leave the way he'd come. I'll see you both at dawn. Your Majesty, Delilah said impulsively. Why are you doing this? You could have just let the treaty break. Vampires would probably win another war. Casimir paused, his back to her. Wars are won through violence and destruction, Miss Vance. But peace requires something far more difficult. Trust, sacrifice, and the courage to make impossible choices. He glanced back, and in the lamplight, his ancient amber eyes seemed infinitely sad. I've seen enough war to last 1,000 lifetimes. If I can prevent another, even through deception, I will. Then he was gone, leaving only a whisper of cold air and the lingering scent of winter. Drake and Delilah stood in silence for a moment. Thank you, Drake said quietly, for everything you're risking. Thank you for being willing to give up everything to keep the peace, Delilah replied. She managed a small smile. I suppose we're both fools. The very best kind. Drake extended his hand and she shook it. If I survive this, if things ever change, I won't forget what you did. Just stay alive, Delilah said. That's all I ask. She left his chambers as the sky began to lighten, her heart pounding with the weight of what was coming. She had perhaps 30 minutes before she needed to be in the east courtyard, time enough to change her clothes, to practice her expression of shock and horror, to prepare for the performance of her life. In her small room in the servants' wing, Delilah stood before the mirror and looked at herself. 23 years old, ordinary brown hair, unremarkable features, nothing special. Just a secretary who had stumbled into a conspiracy that would shape the fate of kingdoms. She thought of Casimir's words, brave and selfless and foolish. Maybe he was right. She changed into a simple gray dress, appropriate for early morning, and pinned her hair back. Her hands were shaking. She forced them to steady. Outside, dawn crept closer. The east courtyard was empty when Delilah arrived, just shadows and frost-covered stone. She stood near the fountain, pretending to admire the sunrise, her breath misting in the cold air. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but she held her ground. She heard Drake's footsteps before she saw him. He emerged from a side corridor, looking composed despite everything. He nodded to her slightly, acknowledging her presence. Then, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Casimir materialized from the shadows near the courtyard's eastern wall, flanked by two other vampires, both white-haired and pale-skinned like him, dressed in dark formal attire that spoke of old wealth and older power. They moved with that same inhuman grace, predators disguised in beautiful human form. Pemberton Drake, Casimir's voice rang out, cold and formal. By the authority of the Shadow Vale Court and the ancient laws of vampire kind, I claim you as bloodkin and traitor to both crowns. Drake's hand went to his dagger, the move practiced and convincing. Your Majesty, I don't know what you're— Don't insult me with lies. Casimir moved faster than human eyes could follow, crossing the courtyard in a blur and grasping Drake by the throat. The move looked violent, but Delilah caught the care in how Casimir controlled his strength. You are half vampire, son of my brother Lucian. You have hidden your nature while serving in the mortal king's government. This is a breach of treaty and a crime against both our peoples. No, Delilah played her part, letting her voice rise in shocked horror. Lord Drake, what is he talking about? Stay back, Miss Vance, Drake gasped, struggling against Casimir's grip. He's mad. I'm not. I'm human. Casimir's other hand moved to Drake's face, and his eyes began to glow with an eerie amber light. Shall I prove it? Shall I force your transformation here and now? Let your king see what you truly are? Drake's struggles intensified, and Delilah had to remind herself this was theater. "Someone help!" she screamed. "Guards! The vampire king is here!" Bells began to ring throughout the palace. Shouts echoed from inside. Within seconds, armed guards poured into the courtyard, weapons drawn. "Stand down!" the captain of the guard commanded. "Release Lord Drake immediately!" Casimir didn't even look at them. "I am King Casimir Nightborn of the Shadow Vale Court. I am here under the provisions of the treaty signed 5 years ago. This man is half vampire and has been living among you in violation of our agreement. I am claiming him under vampire law." "That's impossible," the captain said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Lord Drake is human." "Is he?" Casimir's smile was terrifying. "Test him then. Cut him and watch how fast he heals. Expose him to direct sunlight and see if he burns. Or simply look at his eyes, really look, and see the amber trying to surface beneath the brown." The guards looked at Drake, and Delilah saw doubt spreading across their faces. Drake must have inherited some vampiric features after all, subtle enough to pass as human, but visible once someone knew what to look for. "This is absurd," Drake managed. "I am loyal to King Marcus. I am human. Enough." Casimir's voice cracked like a whip. "You will come with me to face vampire justice, or I will execute you here and now and consider the treaty void." He looked at the guards. "Choose quickly. Your king has approximately 2 minutes before I reach the limits of my patience." "Let him go!" Delilah rushed forward, grabbing Casimir's arm. The contact sent a shock through her. His skin was cold as ice, hard as marble, utterly inhuman. But she held on, playing the desperate employee trying to save her superior. "Please, you're wrong. Lord Drake has served the kingdom faithfully for years. He can't be." Casimir looked down at her, and for just a moment, something softened in his gaze. Then his expression hardened again. "You're brave, little human, but foolish. Step away before you're hurt." One of the other vampires moved to pull her back, but Casimir waved him off. "Leave her. She's innocent in this." King Marcus arrived then, still in his nightclothes with a robe thrown over them, surrounded by more guards and advisors. He was a solid man in his 50s, graying but powerful, and his face was thunderous. "What is the meaning of this invasion?" he demanded. "Not an invasion. Justice." Casimir finally released Drake's throat but kept a grip on his shoulder. "Your Majesty, I regret to inform you that Lord Pemberton Drake is half vampire, born of my brother Lucian Nightborn and a human woman 32 years ago. Under the treaty's provisions, specifically Article 12, Section 7, I claim jurisdiction over him." Marcus's face went pale, then red. "This is ridiculous. Drake is one of my most trusted advisors. I've known him for a decade." "And he's deceived you for every moment of that time." Casimir's voice was merciless. "Search his chambers. You'll find evidence if you look closely enough, a resistance to illness, unusual healing, sensitivity to bright light. Small things, easily overlooked unless you know what to seek." "My lord," Drake said, his voice breaking convincingly, "I swear to you I didn't know. I believed I was human. Spare me your lies," Casimir interrupted. "You knew. You've known for months. You even petitioned me for protection, which is how my investigation began." He looked at King Marcus. "I'm invoking treaty law. You have no choice but to surrender him to vampire custody." Marcus looked at his advisors, who were frantically flipping through treaty documents. One of them, an elderly scholar, nodded grimly. "Article 12, Section 7 does grant the vampire court jurisdiction in cases of suspected infiltration, Your Majesty." "This is insane," Marcus said, but Delilah could hear defeat creeping into his voice. "Drake, tell me the truth. Are you vampire?" Drake met his king's eyes, and the anguish on his face was real. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I'm so sorry." The courtyard erupted in shocked murmurs. Delilah saw genuine betrayal on King Marcus's face, and her heart ached for what this was costing Drake. "Take him," Marcus said finally, the words seeming to physically pain him. "If he's vampire, he's yours. But I want it recorded that the human crown had no knowledge of this deception. We are not responsible for his crimes." "Agreed." Casimir began pulling Drake toward the courtyard's edge, where shadows still pooled. "The treaty holds. Consider this matter resolved." "Wait," Marcus said sharply. "If he's been working in my government, he must have had accomplices, people who helped hide his nature." "I worked alone," Drake said quickly. "No one else knew." I'll need to verify that. Marcus looked at Delilah. Miss Vance, you were here when this began. Did Lord Drake ever show any signs of unusual behavior? Anything that might suggest he wasn't human? Delilah's mind raced. This was the crucial moment. No, Your Majesty. I worked with Lord Drake regularly. He always seemed completely normal. I had no idea. She let her voice tremble, the frightened secretary witnessing her superior's downfall. He was kind to me. I can't believe he was lying this whole time. She's telling the truth, Casimir said. I can hear her heartbeat. She's shocked and frightened, but there's no deception. He smiled coldly. Though I admire the thorough investigation. Very wise, Your Majesty, to suspect everyone. That's how you prevent future infiltrations. Marcus nodded slowly. Very well. Take him and go. And King Casimir, if I discover this was a setup, if I find any evidence that Drake was acting on vampire orders rather than his own deception, then the treaty is void and war resumes, Casimir finished. I'm aware, but I assure you this half-blood acted alone. He's an embarrassment to vampire kind, and he will be punished accordingly. He began to back into the shadows, Drake still in his grasp. The other two vampires followed. Good day, Your Majesty. May the peace between our kingdoms continue. Then they were gone, vanishing into the darkness as if they'd never been there at all. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Guards searched the shadows, advisors argued about treaty law, and King Marcus stood frozen, looking like a man who'd just been betrayed by his closest friend. Delilah backed away slowly, trying to make herself invisible. She needed to get out of here before anyone questioned her too closely. Miss Vance. She froze. King Marcus was looking at her. Your Majesty? She curtsied, keeping her eyes down. You worked closely with Drake. I'll need you to give a full statement to my investigators. Everything you remember about his behavior, his habits, anyone he met with regularly. Of course, Your Majesty. Report to the security office at noon. They'll interview you then. Marcus's voice was heavy with exhaustion. In the meantime, say nothing about this to anyone. That's an order. Yes, Your Majesty. Delilah fled as quickly as dignity allowed, her heart hammering. She'd done it. She'd played her part. Now she just had to survive the interrogation that was coming. She made it to her room before her legs gave out, collapsing on her bed as adrenaline drained away and left her shaking. Drake was gone, taken into the vampire realm. The deception had worked. The treaty held. And Delilah had just lied to her king, committed treason, and tied her fate to the word of an ancient vampire who could kill her without effort. What had she done? The interrogation at noon was brutal. Delilah sat in a windowless stone room deep in the palace's security wing, facing 3 of King Marcus's top investigators. They asked her the same questions over and over, approaching from different angles, trying to catch her in inconsistencies. When did you last see Lord Drake? What was he working on? Did he ever mention family? Did he avoid sunlight? Did he ever drink anything unusual? Did anyone visit him at odd hours? Delilah stuck to her story. She was just a secretary. She sorted mail, filed documents, occasionally brought Drake papers that needed his signature. She'd found him professional, but distant. She'd noticed nothing unusual. The Vampire King's arrival had been as much a shock to her as anyone. You were in the courtyard very early, one investigator noted. Why? I couldn't sleep. I often take walks in the garden when I'm restless. True enough, Delilah had done that many times. I happened to be near the east courtyard when Lord Drake appeared. Then the vampires arrived. And you tried to stop them from taking him. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought they were attacking him. I reacted instinctively. Very brave of you. Or very foolish. Delilah ducked her head. Probably foolish, sir. I'm not a fighter. Lord Drake was always kind to me. I didn't want to see him hurt. Even though he was a traitor? I didn't know that at the time. The questions continued for 3 hours. By the end, Delilah's head ached and her mouth was dry, but she'd maintained her story perfectly. The investigators finally dismissed her with warnings to remain available for follow-up questioning. As she left the security wing, Delilah passed other palace employees being called in for their own interrogations. Drake's arrest had thrown the entire government into chaos. Meetings were being canceled, security protocols reviewed, everyone who'd worked with Drake being investigated. And through it all, Delilah kept her secrets. The days blurred together. Delilah continued her normal work, sorting mail and filing documents, while investigators prowled the halls and the palace buzzed with gossip. She was questioned twice more, but each time the investigators seemed more convinced of her innocence. Just a naive young woman who'd been fooled like everyone else. At night, alone in her room, Delilah wondered about Drake. Was he safe in the vampire realm? Did he regret his choice? And Casimir, what was he doing now? Did he spare even a thought for the human girl who'd helped him, or had she already been forgotten? 2 weeks after the arrest, Delilah was working late in the mailroom when she felt that familiar drop in temperature. She turned, and Casimir stood in the doorway, looking exactly as he had that first night, pale and beautiful and impossibly dangerous. "You survived," he said, the faintest trace of approval in his voice. "So did you," Delilah replied, her heart racing. "And Lord Drake?" "Alive and adjusting to his new life. He wanted me to thank you for your courage." Casimir stepped into the room, and Delilah was struck again by how he seemed to command space simply by existing. "You played your part perfectly. The investigators never suspected you. The treaty holds and both kingdoms remain at peace." "Then why are you here?" "I needed to see you." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. "I've been monitoring the situation, of course, listening to reports, tracking the investigation, but I needed to see with my own eyes that you were well." Something warm unfurled in Delilah's chest. "You were worried about me. Don't sound so pleased with yourself." But Casimir's lips curved in a small smile. "Yes, I was concerned. You took an enormous risk for people you barely knew. That kind of selflessness is rare. I wanted to ensure it wasn't punished. I'm fine. Questioned extensively, but fine." "Good." Casimir moved closer, and Delilah caught that scent again, winter and something ancient, like old stone and midnight. "I also came to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "You've proven yourself trustworthy, brave, and capable of maintaining composure under pressure. Those are valuable qualities." His amber eyes held hers. "I need someone in the mortal court I can communicate with, someone who can pass information between our realms without raising suspicion, someone who can help me prevent future crises before they escalate to the point of war." "You want me to be a spy?" "I want you to be a liaison. There's a difference." Casimir's tone was earnest. "I'm not asking you to betray your kingdom. I'm asking you to help maintain peace between our peoples. When tensions rise, you could warn me. When misunderstandings occur, you could help clarify them. You'd be serving both kingdoms, not betraying either." Delilah's mind spun. "And if I refuse? Then I'll thank you for your service, erase your memory of this conversation, and never contact you again." Casimir's voice was gentle. "I won't force you into this, Delilah. It has to be your choice." She looked at him. This ancient king who could kill her with a thought, but instead was asking for her help. "Why me? You must have other contacts, other resources." "Because you chose to prevent a war when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose," Casimir said simply. "Because you're not motivated by money or power or political advantage. You just want people to stop killing each other. That's exactly the kind of person I need. I'm not naive enough to think there won't be conflicts of interest eventually. Neither am I. But I'm hopeful enough to believe we can navigate them together." He extended his hand, pale and elegant. "What do you say? Delilah Vance? Will you help me build a better peace?" She thought about the bodies in the streets 5 years ago, the brother she'd lost, the families torn apart, the cities burned. She took his hand. It was cold, but his grip was steady and sure. "Yes," she said. "I'll help you." Casimir's smile was radiant. "Excellent, then let me show you something." He pulled her closer, and the world dissolved into shadows and cold. Delilah gasped as reality twisted around her, feeling like she was falling and flying simultaneously. Then, her feet touched solid ground again, and she was somewhere else entirely. They stood in a vast chamber, carved from black stone, illuminated by hundreds of floating orbs that gave off a soft, cold light. The architecture was ancient and elegant, all soaring arches and intricate carvings. Through tall windows, Delilah could see a city sprawled below them, a city of dark towers and winding streets, lit by that same ethereal glow. Welcome to the Shadow Vale, Casimir said. The vampire realm, Delilah's breath caught. It's beautiful. It's home. He led her to one of the windows. Few humans ever see this place, but if we're to work together, you should understand what you're protecting. I thought I was protecting both kingdoms. You are. But peace is built on understanding, and the mortal world understands very little about us. Casimir gestured to the city below. They think we're monsters, and some of us are, I won't lie. But we're also poets and artists, scholars and builders. We've created a civilization that's lasted thousands of years. We have laws, honor codes, families. We love and grieve and dream, even if we do it in the dark. Delilah looked at him. You want me to see you as people, not monsters. I want you to see the whole truth. We're dangerous, yes. We drink blood and live in shadow and possess powers humans can't match. But we're not evil by nature, any more than humans are good by nature. We're just different. His voice softened. And difference doesn't have to mean war. A door at the far end of the chamber opened, and Drake walked in. He looked different. His movements were more fluid, more confident, and his eyes held a faint amber glow. But he was smiling. Miss Vance, I'm so glad to see you. Lord Drake, Delilah found herself smiling too. Or should I call you something else now? Just Drake is fine. I'm no longer a lord of any realm. He crossed to them, and Delilah saw that he looked healthier than she'd ever seen him in the mortal palace. Thank you again for everything you did. His Majesty told me how perfectly you played your part. I'm just glad it worked. It did more than work. You saved my life and prevented a war. Drake glanced at Casimir. I assume you've made your offer. She's accepted, Casimir said. Good. You'll need help navigating both worlds, and I can provide that. I know how the mortal court works, and I'm learning how things operate here. Drake's expression turned serious. It won't be easy. There are factions in both kingdoms that want war, people who profit from conflict. They won't appreciate your efforts. I know, Delilah said, but I still think it's worth trying. Casimir and Drake exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding. Then let me explain how this will work, Casimir said. Once a month, I'll send someone to collect you from the mortal palace. You'll come here, we'll discuss any issues that have arisen, and you'll return before morning. To anyone watching, you're simply vanishing for a few hours, easy enough to explain as insomnia or restlessness. What if there's an emergency? Leave a black rose in the east courtyard fountain. I'll have someone watching for it. They'll contact me immediately. Casimir pulled a small pendant from his pocket, a silver crescent moon on a delicate chain. Wear this. It's spelled to protect you from vampire compulsion and minor enchantments. If anyone tries to use supernatural influence on you, this will block it. Delilah took the pendant, feeling the weight of what she was accepting. This was real. She was really going to be a secret liaison between mortal and vampire kingdoms, lying to her king, trusting ancient immortals, risking execution for treason. She put the pendant on. Casimir's smile was approving. Brave girl. Now, let me take you back before you're missed. The return journey was just as disorienting, but Delilah found herself growing accustomed to the sensation. They appeared in the palace gardens, far from any guards or witnesses. One last thing, Casimir said, catching her hand before she could leave. This will be dangerous. If you're ever compromised, if you're ever in immediate danger, call my name. Just speak it aloud and I'll hear you. I'll come for you. Why would you do that? He looked at her for a long moment, and Delilah saw something in his ancient eyes that made her breath catch something warm and unexpected and terrifying in its intensity. Because you matter, he said simply. Sleep well, Delilah. Then he was gone, and Delilah stood alone in the garden, her hand still warm where he'd touched it. The months that followed fell into a strange rhythm. By day, Delilah was a loyal palace secretary, efficiently managing correspondence and staying invisible amid the ongoing investigations into Drake's betrayal. By night, once a month, she became something else, entirely a bridge between worlds, meeting with Casimir in the Shadow Vale to discuss tensions, clarify misunderstandings, and prevent small conflicts from escalating. She learned the names of vampire nobles, the intricacies of ancient blood feuds, the delicate balance of power within the immortal court. She learned which human nobles were trustworthy and which were warmongers looking for any excuse to resume fighting. She passed information carefully, always framing it as hypothetical concerns rather than direct intelligence, and she found herself falling impossibly, dangerously in love with the Vampire King. It happened so gradually she didn't notice at first, the way Casimir listened when she spoke, treating her insights with the same respect he'd give any advisor. The way he smiled when she made him laugh, a genuine expression that transformed his regal features into something boyish and warm. The way he worried about her safety, always ensuring she was protected during her visits to the Shadow Vale. He told her stories about the centuries he'd lived, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the loves he'd lost and the friends who'd faded into dust. He showed her his library, filled with books from 1,000 different eras. He introduced her to vampire artists and poets, proving his earlier point that his people were more than monsters. And sometimes, when she caught him watching her with those amber eyes, she thought maybe he felt it too, this impossible pull between them. 4 months into their arrangement, everything nearly fell apart. Delilah arrived at the Shadow Vale for her regular meeting to find the palace in chaos. Vampire nobles rushed through corridors, voices raised in argument. Drake met her at the entrance, his face grim. "We have a problem," he said. "A major one." He led her to Casimir's throne room, where the king stood surrounded by advisors, all speaking at once. When Casimir saw Delilah, he dismissed them with a sharp gesture. "Tell me everything you know about Lord Blackwell," he said without preamble. Delilah's mind raced. Lord Gerald Blackwell was King Marcus's military advisor, a hardliner who'd never supported the peace treaty. "He's been pushing for increased military spending, claims we need to be ready in case the treaty fails. Why? Because my spies just intercepted communications suggesting he's planning to manufacture an incident, something that will look like a vampire attack on a human village, giving King Marcus grounds to declare the treaty void and resume war." Casimir's voice was tight with controlled fury. "He wants war, and he's willing to kill his own people to get it." "That's insane," Delilah breathed. "That's politics." Casimir began pacing, a predatory movement that reminded her he was far from human. "If he succeeds, if innocent humans die in what appears to be a vampire attack, nothing, I say, will matter. King Marcus will have to respond with force or appear weak. The treaty will collapse." "When is this supposed to happen?" 3 days from now, a small village called Thornbrook, on the border between our territories. Blackwell's mercenaries will attack at night, dressed in dark clothing, using weapons designed to mimic vampire claw marks. Drake's voice was bitter. "I remember his tactics from my time at court. He's thorough and ruthless." Delilah's mind worked frantically. "Can you stop it? Send your own people to protect the village?" "If vampires appear in a human village the night of an attack, even to help, it will look like confirmation of our guilt," Casimir said. "We'd be playing into Blackwell's hands." "Then I'll warn King Marcus." "With what proof?" Casimir stopped pacing, looking at her intently. "You can't reveal that you have vampire intelligence sources without exposing yourself, and Blackwell is clever, he'll have covered his tracks. It will be your word against his, and he's a decorated military commander while you're just a secretary." Delilah felt frustration rising. "So we just let it happen? Let innocent people die?" "No." Casimir's voice was firm. "We stop it, but carefully, in a way that exposes Blackwell without exposing you or breaking the treaty." He looked at Drake. "You said Blackwell keeps records of his operations, correct?" "Always. He's paranoid about maintaining deniability. Everything is written in code and kept in his private office." Drake's eyes widened. "You want to steal them? I want proof that will convince King Marcus his own advisor is a traitor." Casimir turned to Delilah. "Can you get us into the palace, into Blackwell's office?" "That's incredibly dangerous," Delilah said, but she was already thinking through possibilities. "His office is in the military wing, heavily guarded, but I have access to the building. I sometimes deliver correspondence there. If I could get you inside during the day, when Blackwell is in meetings." "Vampires can't move freely during daylight hours," Casimir reminded her, "but I can send someone with me who can tolerate limited sun exposure, one of my half-blood operatives." He looked at Drake. "Will you do this, Return to the palace that condemned you? Drake's jaw tightened. To save innocent lives? Of course. Then here's the plan, Casimir said, and they began plotting. 2 days later, Delilah walked into the palace military wing carrying a stack of documents that needed Blackwell's signature. Her heart hammered as she approached the guards. Lord Blackwell's office, please. I have urgent papers from the Treasury. The guards checked her credentials and waved her through. Delilah climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, where Blackwell maintained his private office. She'd timed this carefully. He was in a council meeting that would last at least 2 hours. She knocked on the office door. No answer. Perfect. Delilah pulled out her keyring. Technically, she had a master key that opened most administrative offices for occasions when documents needed to be delivered after hours. She'd never used it for anything unauthorized before. The door clicked open. Delilah slipped inside, heart racing. Blackwell's office was spartanly furnished: a desk, filing cabinets, military maps on the walls. She moved to the window and opened it slightly, the signal she'd arranged. Nothing happened for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then Drake appeared outside the window, clinging to the stone wall with inhuman strength. He'd changed since his transformation, becoming more vampire than human, but he was still recognizable. If anyone saw him, he slipped through the window with liquid grace. Where are the files? Probably in the desk or cabinets. He keeps everything locked. Delilah pulled out her keyring again, but Drake waved her off. Let me. He produced a set of lockpicks and went to work on the desk. Within seconds, the drawer opened. Inside was a leather journal, its pages covered in coded writing. Drake's face went pale as he flipped through it. This is it. Orders to the mercenaries, plans for the attack, everything. He even detailed how to make the wounds look like vampire bites. His voice shook with rage. He's planning to kill 15 people, families, children. Take it, Delilah said. We'll deliver it to King Marcus anonymously. No. Drake's eyes met hers. That won't work. Blackwell will claim it's a forgery, vampire propaganda. We need something more direct. What do you suggest? I turn myself in. Delilah's blood ran cold. Absolutely not. They'll execute you. They'll try. Drake's smile was grim. But I'm much harder to kill now than I was as a human, and with Casimir's protection and this journal as evidence, I can expose Blackwell's plot directly to the king. I can testify about what I found, submit to truth-seeking magic. Prove I'm telling the truth. That's suicide. It's justice. Drake closed the journal. And it's the only way to stop this that doesn't risk exposing you. Delilah, you're too valuable to both kingdoms. You need to stay hidden, stay safe, keep building bridges. But I'm already considered a traitor. I have nothing left to lose. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Someone was coming. Go, Drake hissed, shoving the journal into his jacket. I'll leave through the window. You were never here. Drake, tell Casimir I'm sorry, but this is the right move. He'll understand. Drake moved to the window. Thank you, Delilah, for everything. Then he was gone, disappearing into the afternoon shadows. Delilah barely had time to close the drawer and step away from the desk before the door opened. Lord Blackwell himself walked in, stopping short when he saw her. Miss Vance, what are you doing in my office? Delilah's mind went blank with panic for half a second, then snapped into focus. She held up her stack of documents. I have papers for your signature, my lord. The door was ajar, so I thought you were here. I was about to leave a note. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. The door was locked. It was open when I arrived. Perhaps your last visitor didn't close it properly? Delilah kept her voice steady, innocent. I apologize if I overstepped. I'll just leave these on your desk. She set down the documents and moved toward the door, every instinct screaming at her to run. Blackwell watched her with suspicion, but he didn't stop her. Miss Vance. She froze. Yes, my lord. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Anyone acting suspiciously? No, my lord. Why do you ask? Just ensuring security. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You may go. Delilah fled. She made it back to her room before her legs gave out, adrenaline crashing through her system. Drake was going to turn himself in. He was going to risk everything to stop Blackwell's plot. She had to warn Casimir. That night, Delilah left a black rose in the east courtyard fountain. Within an hour, Casimir appeared in her room. His expression was thunderous. Drake did what? Delilah explained everything: the journal, the evidence, Drake's plan to testify directly to King Marcus. He said you'd understand, that this was the only way to stop Blackwell without exposing me. Casimir was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy. He's right. Damn him, but he's right. If Drake testifies under truth magic, if he presents that evidence directly, King Marcus will have to act. Blackwell will be arrested, the plot will be stopped, and the treaty will hold. But Drake will be executed. Not if I can help it. Casimir's eyes blazed with determination. I'll invoke diplomatic protection, claim him as my subject. Marcus owes me that much. I gave him warning about the first infiltration. He should grant me this. And if he doesn't? Casimir's smile was cold and dangerous. Then I'll remind him that vampires can wage war in ways humans can't imagine, and that his best interest lies in cooperation. He took Delilah's hand. Don't worry. I won't let Drake die for doing the right thing. The next morning, chaos erupted in the palace. Pemberton Drake had walked through the main gates at dawn, surrendered himself to the guards, and demanded an immediate audience with King Marcus. He carried with him Lord Blackwell's journal and a full confession of what he'd discovered. Delilah watched from a distance as Drake was brought into the throne room in chains. Casimir appeared moments later, demanding to be present for any interrogation under the treaty's diplomatic provisions. The whole court buzzed with shock and confusion. King Marcus, looking exhausted and furious, ordered truth-seeking mages brought in. For 3 hours, they questioned Drake under magical compulsion, verifying every word he said. The journal was real. The plot was real. Lord Blackwell had indeed planned to murder 15 innocent humans and blame it on vampires to restart the war. When the truth emerged, Marcus's face turned purple with rage. He ordered Blackwell arrested immediately. The military advisor tried to flee but was caught before he reached the gates. His mercenaries were rounded up within hours, and Drake, the traitor who'd returned to expose it all, stood before the king awaiting judgment. You have committed treason against the human crown, Marcus said heavily, but you have also prevented a massacre and exposed a genuine traitor within my own government. He looked at Casimir. Your Majesty, you claim this man as your subject? I do, Casimir said firmly. He acted on my orders to investigate suspicious activity along our border. His methods were unorthodox, but his intentions were to preserve the peace we both value. Marcus studied Drake for a long moment. I should execute you anyway. You deceived me for years. I know, Your Majesty, Drake said quietly, and I'm sorry for that deception. But I never betrayed your trust in the ways that mattered. I served faithfully, and I continue to serve the cause of peace between our peoples. Peace, Marcus laughed bitterly. One of my top advisors was planning mass murder, and my other top advisor was secretly half vampire. It's a miracle we've maintained peace at all. It's not a miracle, Casimir said. It's choice. Every day we choose cooperation over conflict, understanding over hatred, trust over fear. Today, Pemberton Drake chose to risk everything to prevent innocent deaths. That deserves recognition, not execution. Marcus sighed. Very well. Drake, I hereby banish you from human territories. You are to leave immediately and never return. If you're found within our borders again, the sentence is death. Agreed? Agreed, Drake said, relief evident on his face. And King Casimir, this balances our accounts. You warned me of an infiltration. I'm granting you custody of the infiltrator. We're even. Agreed, Casimir said. As Drake was led away toward freedom rather than execution, Delilah felt tears of relief prick her eyes. He'd done it. They'd all done it. Blackwell's plot was stopped, the peace was preserved, and Drake was alive. But then King Marcus spoke again, and Delilah's blood ran cold. However, I'm not satisfied that Drake acted entirely alone in uncovering this conspiracy. Someone helped him gain access to Blackwell's office, someone inside the palace. Marcus's gaze swept the assembled court. I want a full investigation. Question everyone with keys to the military wing. Find out who Drake's accomplice was. Delilah kept her face neutral, but inside she was screaming. They would question her. They would discover she'd been in Blackwell's office that day. And this time, she wouldn't have the luxury of hiding behind ignorance. That night, when Casimir came to her room, Delilah was packing. What are you doing? he asked. They're going to figure out it was me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually they'll trace my key access, interview the guards, check the records. I'll be exposed as a traitor. Her hands shook as she folded clothes. I need to run before they arrest me. No. Casimir caught her hands, stilling them. You need to trust me. I do trust you, but then let me protect you. His amber eyes were intense. Delilah, you've risked everything for peace. You've lied to your king, defied your kingdom's laws, and trusted ancient vampires. You've been braver than anyone has a right to ask. Now, let me return that courage with protection. How? You can't just make the investigation disappear. No, but I can provide an alternative explanation. Casimir's voice was steady. Tomorrow, I'll return to King Marcus with new information. I'll tell him that I had another operative in his palace, a human sympathizer who's been feeding me intelligence for years. I'll claim this person helped Drake as part of my network, and that they've now fled to vampire territory where Marcus can't reach them. He'll demand to know who it was. And I'll refuse to reveal my sources. It will strain our diplomatic relationship, but not break it. Marcus will be frustrated, but he'll accept it because the alternative is resuming hostilities, and he knows his kingdom isn't ready for that. Casimir's grip on her hands tightened. You'll stay here, continue your work, and weather the investigation. Without concrete proof, they can't move against you. What if they find proof? Then you call my name, and I'll come for you. I'll take you to the Shadow Vale and grant you asylum. You'll be safe. His voice dropped. I won't let them hurt you, Delilah. I swear it. She looked up at him, this ancient king who'd become so important to her, and felt her last defenses crumble. Why do you care so much? I'm just a human, just a secretary. Why does my safety matter to you? Casimir's expression softened into something achingly tender. Because somewhere between that first night in the garden and now, you became far more than that. He lifted one hand to cup her face, his touch cool and gentle. You became essential. You became someone I think about constantly, someone whose smile brightens even immortal existence, someone whose courage and kindness make me want to be better than I am. His thumb brushed her cheek. You became someone I love. Delilah's breath caught. Casimir. I know it's impossible. I know I'm a vampire king and you're a human secretary, that we're from different worlds with different lifespans, that 1,000 practical concerns make this inadvisable. His smile was sad, but I stopped being able to lie to myself about my feelings months ago. I love you, Delilah Vance, and I will protect you with everything I have. You love me, she repeated, testing the words, desperately, inconveniently, completely. Delilah reached up and pulled him down into a kiss. He froze for half a second, then kissed her back with a passion that stole her breath. His lips were cool but soft, moving against hers with centuries of experience and immediate, overwhelming need. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and Delilah melted into him despite the cold radiating from his body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least Delilah was breathing hard, Casimir didn't actually need to breathe. She smiled up at him. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have for months, but I was too afraid to admit it. You're a vampire king, and I'm nobody. And I thought, you're not nobody. Casimir's voice was fierce. You're extraordinary. You're brave and clever and kind, and you make me feel things I thought I'd forgotten how to feel after centuries of existence. You make me hope again. What do we do now? Now, Casimir's smile turned playful. Now I court you properly, or as properly as an immortal vampire can court a mortal woman while maintaining elaborate political deceptions and preventing international incidents. Despite everything, Delilah laughed. That sounds complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. He kissed her again, softer this time. But we'll navigate it together. I'll help you survive the investigation. You'll continue your work as liaison, and we'll build something new, a relationship that bridges our two worlds. What about the fact that I'm mortal and you're not? Casimir's expression grew serious. There are ways to address that, when and if you choose. Vampirism can be shared under the right circumstances. But that's a decision for the future, after you've had time to consider what it would mean. For now, we simply love each other and see where that leads. Delilah nodded, feeling peace settle over her. Okay, together then. Together. The investigation into Blackwell's accomplice lasted for weeks, but Casimir's strategy worked. He provided King Marcus with just enough information to suggest a sophisticated vampire spy network within the palace, making the king reluctant to dig too deeply lest he expose more infiltration. The investigators questioned Delilah twice, but without concrete evidence linking her to Drake, they eventually moved on to other suspects. Blackwell himself was tried and executed for treason. His mercenaries confessed everything under truth magic, confirming the plot in excruciating detail. The village of Thornbrook, unaware of how close it had come to massacre, continued its peaceful existence on the border between kingdoms. And Delilah continued her work as secret liaison, now with the added complexity of being the Vampire King's beloved. Their relationship deepened slowly, carefully, built on stolen moments and secret meetings. Casimir taught her about vampire culture and history, introduced her to the complexities of his court, and showed her the beauty that existed in shadow and darkness. Delilah helped him understand the changing mortal world, the shifting politics and new generations who were gradually learning to see vampires as people rather than monsters. They were careful, always aware that discovery could destroy everything they'd built. But within the Shadow Veil's protected walls, they could simply be themselves, two people from different worlds who'd found unexpected love in the midst of political intrigue. A year after Drake's return and Blackwell's exposure, Delilah stood in Casimir's private chambers, looking out over the vampire city. She wore a gown of midnight blue, a gift from Casimir that made her feel like royalty herself. "You're thinking," Casimir said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I can always tell." "I'm thinking about how strange my life has become," Delilah admitted. "A year ago, I was just a secretary sorting mail. Now I'm dating a vampire king and helping maintain peace between kingdoms. It's surreal." "Regrets?" "Not one." She leaned back against him, comfortable with his coolness now. "Though I do wonder sometimes how long we can maintain the secret. Someone will notice eventually that I'm spending time in the vampire realm." "Let them notice." Casimir's voice was calm. "You've proven yourself a dozen times over this past year. You've prevented 3 potential diplomatic incidents, facilitated 2 trade agreements, and helped establish cultural exchange programs between our realms. If your relationship with me became public knowledge now, King Marcus might grumble. But he wouldn't act against you. You're too valuable. You sound very certain of that." "I am, because I've been preparing for this moment." Casimir turned her around to face him. "Delilah, I want to make our relationship official. Not secret, not hidden, acknowledged by both kingdoms. I want you as my queen." Delilah's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me." Casimir pulled out a ring, a band of silver set with a stone that glowed with inner light. "Not immediately, not without careful planning and diplomatic preparation. But eventually. I want you at my side, publicly and proudly. I want both kingdoms to see that peace isn't just a treaty, it's a bond between people, between hearts, between worlds. That's incredibly idealistic. I'm incredibly in love." Casimir's smile was tender. "You've made me believe in possibility again, Delilah, in change, in growth, in a future where vampires and humans don't just coexist, but truly understand each other. I want to build that future with you. What do you say?" Delilah looked at the ring, then at Casimir's hopeful face. She thought about everything they'd been through, everything they'd built together. She thought about the peace they'd preserved and the love they'd found. "Yes," she said, "yes, I'll marry you." Casimir's whoop of joy was decidedly undignified for a king, and Delilah laughed as he spun her around. When he set her down, he slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with such passion that she forgot to breathe. The engagement process took months of careful diplomacy. Casimir formally petitioned King Marcus for permission to marry a human subject of the mortal crown. Marcus, after much grumbling and consultation with advisors, agreed on the condition that Delilah be granted the title of ambassador to the vampire court, making her relationship with Casimir a matter of official state business rather than personal scandal. The wedding was held at the border between kingdoms, in a newly constructed pavilion that existed in both mortal and vampire territory simultaneously. It was attended by representatives from both courts, a symbolic gesture of unity that made headlines across the continent. Delilah wore white, as was human custom, but her gown was embroidered with silver thread that caught the moonlight. Casimir wore formal vampire regalia, black and silver and regal, his white hair adorned with a crown that had been in his family for millennia. Drake served as best man, having been granted special dispensation to attend. He'd fully embraced his vampire nature now, confident and powerful, and he smiled with genuine joy as he watched them exchange vows. "I, Casimir Nightborn, king of the Shadow Vale, take you, Delilah Vance, as my queen and consort," Casimir said, his voice carrying across the pavilion. "I pledge to honor you, protect you, and love you for as long as we both exist. I will bridge worlds for you, challenge ancient customs for you, and build a future worthy of you. I, Delilah Vance, take you, Casimir Nightborn, as my husband and king," Delilah replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I pledge to stand beside you, to choose courage over fear, and to love you across any divide. I will be your connection to the mortal world, your partner in peace, and your companion through all the years ahead." The officiants, one human priest, one vampire elder, pronounced them married, and when Casimir kissed his bride, the assembled crowd from both kingdoms erupted in genuine applause. It wasn't perfect. There were still hardliners on both sides who opposed the union, still tensions and misunderstandings, and moments when old hatreds threatened to resurface. But Casimir and Delilah faced them together, a living symbol of what peace could look like. In the months that followed, Delilah discovered that being vampire queen was even more complicated than being a secret liaison. She had to learn court protocols, manage diplomatic relationships, and navigate the intricate politics of immortal nobles. But she also had influence now, real power to shape policy and prevent conflicts. She established educational programs that brought human and vampire scholars together. She created cultural festivals that celebrated both mortal and immortal traditions. She worked with Drake to train a new generation of liaisons, people dedicated to maintaining understanding between the kingdoms. And through it all, she had Casimir at her side, her husband, her partner, her love. 1 year into their marriage, Delilah stood on the balcony of their shared chambers, watching the sun set over the border between realms. She still chose to remain human, unwilling to give up the daylight she cherished, but Casimir had never pushed her. Their love existed in the twilight hours between day and night, in the spaces where mortal and immortal overlapped. "Happy anniversary," Casimir said, joining her on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine, human wine for her, wine mixed with blood for himself. "Has it really been a year already?" "1 year since our wedding. 2.5 years since you stole a letter that changed everything." Casimir's smile was warm. "Best theft in recorded history, I'd say." Delilah laughed. "I still can't believe that's how this started. Me, terrified in a mailroom, making a split-second decision that upended my entire life. Not just your life. You helped prevent a war, exposed a traitor, saved my nephew, and eventually became my queen. That's quite an impressive career trajectory for a secretary." He pulled her close. "I'm very grateful you were brave that night. I'm grateful you didn't kill me for my impertinence." "I was tempted," Casimir admitted with mock seriousness, "but you were so earnest, standing there telling the vampire king that you wouldn't betray him. I knew then that you were special." "Love at first sight? Intrigue at first sight. Love came later, when I started to understand just how remarkable you truly are." He kissed her temple. "And it deepens every day." They stood together as the sun disappeared completely, giving way to the stars and moon that Casimir loved. In the distance, Delilah could see lights from both the mortal palace and the vampire city, 2 realms existing side by side in hard-won peace. "I've been thinking about the future," Delilah said quietly. "What about it?" "I want to write everything down. Our story. How this all happened. Not for publication, I know too many details need to stay secret, but for the future, so that someday people can understand how we got from war to peace. How a letter and a brave choice and a lot of desperate improvisation saved thousands of lives." Casimir considered this. a chronicle of our unlikely romance and even more unlikely diplomatic success. I like it, though I must insist you include the part where you stole from me. That's my favorite detail. And I'll include the part where you threatened to come for me if I betrayed you. Very romantic. I was quite terrifying, wasn't I? Absolutely terrifying. I was shaking. But you stood your ground anyway. Casimir's voice turned serious. That's what I love most about you, Delilah. You're afraid sometimes you should be, given the dangerous situations you've navigated, but you never let fear stop you from doing what's right. You're the bravest person I've ever known, mortal or immortal. I had good reason to be brave, good people depending on me. She turned in his arms to face him, and somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just being brave for peace or for the kingdoms. I was being brave for you, because I wanted a world where we could be together. You have it now, Casimir said softly. We both do. A world where a vampire king can love a human woman, where our people can learn from each other instead of destroying each other. It's not perfect, but it's real. We made it real. Delilah kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. When they parted, she smiled. So what happens now? We've prevented war, exposed traitors, established peace, and gotten married. What's next for the vampire king and his mortal queen? Now, Casimir's eyes sparkled with amusement and affection. Now we live. We rule wisely, love deeply, and continue building bridges between our worlds. We face whatever challenges come with grace and courage. We dance at festivals, negotiate treaties, and steal quiet moments like this whenever we can. He kissed her again. We have a lifetime ahead of us, or several lifetimes, if you eventually choose transformation. Either way, we have time. Time to grow, to learn, to love. That's more than enough. More than I ever dreamed of, Delilah agreed. They stood together on the balcony as night deepened, the vampire queen and her king, watching over their realm with hope and determination. In the Shadowvale city below, vampires went about their evening business. In the mortal palace across the border, humans slept peacefully, unaware of how close they'd come to destruction and how much they owed to a brave secretary and a vampire king who chose peace over war. The treaty between kingdoms held strong, reinforced not just by law, but by genuine understanding and the living proof that love could bridge any divide. Trade flourished, cultural exchanges expanded, and slowly, very slowly, old fears began to fade. There were still difficulties ahead. There always would be. But Delilah and Casimir had proven that with courage, trust, and love, even the most impossible obstacles could be overcome. And it had all started with a secret letter, a desperate choice, and a young woman brave enough to steal from the vampire king to save his throne by dawn. Years later, when historians wrote about the second great peace between vampires and humans, they would point to many factors: diplomatic brilliance, economic incentives, changing social attitudes. But those who truly knew the story understood that it came down to something simpler and more profound. It came down to a 23-year-old secretary named Delilah Vance, who saw a letter that could start a war and chose to hide it instead, who trusted an ancient vampire king and earned his trust in return, who risked everything for peace and found love in the process. Her story became legend, though most of the details remained classified for decades. But the outcome was clear. Two kingdoms learned to coexist, two people from different worlds built a life together, and the peace they fought for endured. Delilah eventually chose transformation, unable to bear the thought of leaving Casimir alone after a human lifetime. She became fully vampire on their 10th anniversary, the ceremony witnessed by representatives from both kingdoms and celebrated as a symbol of lasting unity. As Queen of the Shadowvale, she ruled with wisdom and compassion for centuries, never forgetting her human roots and always working to strengthen bonds between the mortal and immortal realms. She and Casimir became the longest ruling monarchs in vampire history, beloved by their people and respected throughout the world. Drake served as their chief ambassador, eventually finding love of his own with a human diplomat who chose transformation to be with him. Together, they established the first school for half-blood vampires, teaching young people how to navigate both worlds with pride and confidence. The treaty between kingdoms was renewed every decade, each time with greater enthusiasm and less suspicion. Wars became unthinkable. Cooperation became normal. And the story of the vampire king and his mortal queen, who'd fallen in love while preventing disaster, inspired generations to choose understanding over fear. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Casimir and Delilah returned to the spot where they had first met, the palace gardens, where she'd hidden with a stolen letter, and he'd appeared from shadows to threaten her. "I was so terrified of you that night," Delilah remembered, laughing. "You hid it well. I thought you were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "You said that then, too. Did you ever decide which?" Casimir pulled her close, his amber eyes warm with love. "Both. You were brave enough to risk everything, and foolish enough to think you could outsmart the vampire king. It was an irresistible combination. Lucky for me you find foolishness attractive. Lucky for both of us you found courage when it mattered most." He kissed her softly. "Thank you, Delilah. For stealing that letter, for trusting me, for building this life with me. You gave me everything I'd stopped believing was possible: love, hope, purpose. You saved more than my throne that dawn. You saved me." "You saved me too," Delilah whispered, "from a small, safe life that would have meant nothing. You showed me I could be brave, that I could matter, that I could make a difference. You gave me a love worth fighting for and a purpose worth living for." They stood together in the garden as twilight fell, the perfect hour when mortal and immortal could share the world equally. Around them, the kingdoms they'd worked so hard to unite flourished in peace and prosperity. And it had all begun with a secret letter, a terrified secretary, and a choice to hide the truth that ended up revealing something far more important: that love could conquer any divide, that courage could prevent any disaster, and that peace was always worth fighting for. The letter itself had burned to ash years ago, its dangerous contents lost to history. But what it had set in motion endured: a love story that bridged two worlds, a friendship that prevented war, and a legacy of peace that would last for generations to come. Delilah Vance had hidden the vampire king's secret letter from the mortal king and saved his throne by dawn. But in doing so, she'd accomplished something far greater. She'd proven that even in a world divided between darkness and light, between mortal and immortal, love could find a way. And they lived, beautifully and impossibly, ever after.